Jenny, really looking forward to today's conversation. I know it's been on the calendar for a while. It's been something that I've been excited to meet you and learn more about the history of Leapsome and the exciting future as well. So, to get us going, would love to just kind of learn about some of the early days of Leapsome and some of the ideas you guys had just launching the company. And I'll tell you, maybe just to frame this, my observations watching you guys grow and develop was there was this cluster of talent solutions that kind of all came out and were all thriving around that COVID era. But what was different from my vantage point with Leapsome was every time I would check your page, there was new products, there was new modules, there was new features. And then it seemed like you guys weren't just satisfied with just being an engagement tool, a performance tool, but it was always evolving. So I'm leading the witness, but would love to just learn more about the history and how you guys kind of set on that trajectory.
Awesome. Let me try to do this really crisp so we can focus on the needs of our customers today. So we started the company 10 years ago, and we basically started building the tool we wish we would have had in previous companies. And the initial vision of Leapsome was actually to build this organizational intelligence layer that could be kind of your buddy as a manager, as a CEO, as an individual contributor that really helps you to succeed in your role and have the highest impact for the company and the fastest sort of like growth in your career. So this was really the starting point. So it was very manager, employee, and obviously also HR oriented. But that's maybe also one important difference we can come back to. And we had to start somewhere. Like you can't build out this broad vision you have from the start. So we started out more on the feedback performance side, added OKR, so kind of alignment tools early on, added engagement and then learning early on. And we thrived really fast at this talent, very holistic talent solution. Already at the time, I think we were covering a broader space than many of the other talent solutions. And we always had the vision to ultimately really be that holistic system that can cover kind of the hire to retire with this really, really strong talent and organizational intelligence layer. And this is why we then ultimately added about 2 years ago the core HR part, the HRS part to it. And we're actually adding an ATS this year. So really the whole kind of like hire to retire core HR system, but really thriving on what ultimately helps HR leaders to be that strategic and value generating partner to the business and really help build really high performing teams and give individuals really the chance to grow and have very successful careers and true impact.
Yeah. So what advantage does it give you when so many of these full suite HRIS HCM platforms start from a payroll vantage point and they build out from there? What advantage does coming from talent and going the direction you have give Leapsome?
I mean, I think ultimately, if you think about some of the most pressing issues that a VP of people will kind of have on their plate, I think if I always love asking CPOs or VP people what their top 3 priorities are. And I think lately, kind of the 3 that I think have come up most consistently is like, how do we build high performing teams? How do we pay people fairly, especially as some of the challenges around how do we pay in an era of AI are very sort of top of mind for people. And the third one is how do we use AI effectively in HR teams and what does that even mean? And this is where I think it shows that a lot of the value that an HR leader brings to the company really comes through the strategic layer of how do I build highly engaged, highly performing teams, like what culture do I carry forward? It also is the question of what can I automate? I think we forget that there's still so many manual steps that many HR managers are doing. So how do we avoid sort of some of that manual work that often comes from disconnected tools where I can't actually have the workflow really span the more administrational, maybe the compliance layer to the full talent layer. And just an example, I think we support organizations between like 50 to 1,500 employees. That's kind of our sweet spot. And even an organization with 3 or 4 HR people usually saves about like 2 days a week with using Leapsome when using the full platform. And I think it shows like when we actually free that manual work. And that's a lot of time we can use for higher value, more strategic priorities, where again, we actually deliver much higher value to the business than copying data from one system to another or uploading documents or trying to gather analytics or reports. So this is really where we start from the pain points of our customers and really help them to have data that's connected in one place. We help them to truly automate workflows where it ultimately enables them to both have a better employee experience, but also to, again, like eradicate unnecessary manual work. And I think what's also like really interesting and very top of mind is like, how do you use AI in a meaningful way, right? And it's not this flashy little thing that you have on the side, but it's truly something that can be very helpful in many of the jobs to be done that a people team and a people leader has on their plate. And we could go into some of those in more depth, but that's kind of how we think about it. And maybe coming back to your initial question, like we have that strong thinking of workflows. We have that focus on the manager and the individual contributor perspective alongside HR, right? So it actually enables us to have that adoption advantage. And actually, HR programs are only worth the effort if they actually move the impact or move the needle in the company. So that's kind of part of our core DNA.
Yeah, it's like you have to, one, you started from the strategy level, not the tactical level, but two, you thought about the managers and employees, not just the HR needs, right? And so like those are very different lenses to start with. And I want to hold on the AI topic because I know once we get there, we'll never leave it. But just two other areas I want to hit first. So one is you mentioned 2 years ago entering the HRIS arena and launching that product or that module. And then obviously very notably a peer got into the space around the same time, decided to exit. So I think there was question, well, are other folks going to decide this isn't a market worth chasing? And you came out and very kind of full-throatedly said, no, we are definitively in the HRIS space. So tell me, I guess, why do you think others maybe have shied away from it? And what's got you guys thinking like we're not looking back?
I mean, there are lots of respect for that competitor. It must have been a really, really hard decision. And I mean, again, like I think there is definite space for a vendor. And I mean, it's beautiful for us that we're the only one with that proposition to not have to choose between a strong talent management player or a transactional HR platform, right? That's the reality. There's a lot of buyers out there that ultimately have to make the choice of I have a talent management platform on top of my transactional player and have all the challenges with disconnected workflows, disconnected data, not being able to have the whole AI capabilities across my stack. Or the reality is in a lot of companies, you don't actually get the budget these days anymore for two different tools. So you actually have to work with the relatively subpar talent functionality of a transactional HR system, which don't enable you to get that job of being that strategic people leader done effectively. Like it's hard to do that if you don't actually have the tools that enable you to do that job well or be that partner to the business. And so we absolutely believe that this is a tool that the market need. And that's also the validation we get from the market. We actually also have a lot of buyers who went with that competitor when they went down the road of having both systems together and now transitioned onto Leapsome. And I think what is the fundamental difference based on like the outside-in perspective between what they've done but what we are doing? Anecdotally, from what I understand, is they've built their HRS kind of like as a skunk works next to their talent system and never fully sort of integrated them from the get-go. We took a very different approach and said part of the strengths of Leapsome, even before we went into HRS, was the workflow layer. And to some extent, we've always had a bit of a shadow HRS already at that stage. And we decided to actually build our broad core HR platform very, very deeply integrated to our existing talent suite. All the benefits of the connected workflows, the connected analytics, the intuitive experience for the manager and the employee are core to where we started building the system like 10 years ago. So I think that's like a fundamental difference. It's very tightly integrated between talent and core HR.
Well, thank you for that. And the other topic I wanted to explore before we get to AI was just talking a little bit about the global advantage and the global perspective that you guys bring for your customers. I think back to we were founded in 2018. And so I remember the first conversations I had when global would come up pre-pandemic. And I was just like, whoa, this is so complex. Thankfully, this never comes up because I don't really know what to do with it. And then fast forward just a couple years and it's just the norm, right? It is an expectation. And obviously, you guys started in Europe and have expanded globally from there. But just tell me a little bit more about some of the advantages that history, where you guys started and where you're heading, has given you, especially in a market that's really looking for not just a system that can claim to be global, but understands really the nuances on the ground level, country to country, localization, compliance, all those important details.
Yes, so very important. We have two offices. We have one in New York City. We have one in Berlin. I'm based in New York City. My co-founder's in Berlin, and we have like all of the customer-facing parts of the business also in New York. So sales, CS, support. So folks out of our New York team work with our customers in the US, and folks out of our Berlin team work with our customers in Europe. And I think that helps us to actually have a good understanding of the needs and pains of the buyers in both markets because we're like directly, constantly in conversations with buyers on both continents. I think that's a big advantage. And I like to joke that we bring the best of German engineering. So like the diligence, the like, let's make sure everything really works. Let's make sure we have deep understanding for the compliance, all of the regulation coming out, given how important that is also in Europe. But we also have the best in class UI and ease of use and experience that's important to succeed in the US. And so I think that's something we bring together on like a principles and design perspective. And then obviously, if you do business in Europe, like even from the get-go, you often have like customers with offices and employees in multiple countries and geographies. So you need to be able to cater to that complexity of different regulation, different compliance. I mean, very like basic things, different absence policies, different time tracking, right? So I think that is some different payroll integrations. So that is something that's also like part of our DNA, just by a merit of that we focus on Western Europe and the US very early on.
Yeah, it's something that buyers always relate to us is, any salesperson is going to say, if a client says I need global, they're going to say I'm global. But it's like, what does that look like in practice? And the example I always point to is like some of those US based HCM systems that started in payroll, they're going to say they're global, but then they're going to like give employees in Barcelona the 4th of July off and ask for their social security number. And it's just like, it doesn't feel global to that employee experience where they feel like they're a second class citizen in the system that they're operating in. And so I think getting that right has been something that we've seen really show up and really move the needle in the sales processes. But on that note, with like spanning the different markets that you guys play in, do you feel like getting into the payroll level is something that right now just kind of having like the payroll connectors is the right place to land? Does it make sense to go further into like embedding or even building your own? Like, how do you think about getting all the way down to that level?
Yeah. So right now we have tight partnerships with payroll providers in both, like in the different geographies, and we're continue to tighten those partnerships. We are thinking embedded. We will also like look how we further evolve that part of the platform. Right now, the focus is, as mentioned, ATS coming out soon. It is continuing to broaden and deepen our capabilities across the entire platform. In particular, when we think about more AI capabilities, which is something where I think we're really ahead of many of our competitors. And I think we're a lot of value is generated for teams these days.
Yeah, well, it sounds like there's another payroll conversation later, so we'll get to that at another date. But let's jump into AI. And one of the things that I thought was really notable was looking at your past experiences and how you were doing AI conversations well before it was cool. You had the stop at Singularity University, which is very focused on obviously the futurism, and AI is a big part of that. But tell me more about like your journey to AI before we get to Leapsomes.
I mean, I think it's funny. It's what I think I mentioned briefly when we spoke about the history of Leapsome. Like, we had this vision when we first started building the company. And this was actually briefly after, or like very shortly after I'd spent about 6 months in the Bay Area at Singularity University, which was started by Ray Kurzweil, who's the author of The Singularity is Near and was one of the sort of AI strategists at Google. So we had a lot of exposure at the time to what might be possible at some point in time. And so the first sort of like version of what we'd like to build was very much like in line with actually a lot of the capabilities we have now and what we are also like what we're expanding in the near future. And it's really having the context of your organization, of your job, and helping someone to truly understand kind of where to focus, how to become better, how to build a better organization. So I think it's kind of like it feels like full circle from seeing where the future might take us and being slightly frustrated that we couldn't build it at the time. So here we are now. With more than 2,000 customers, like really interesting historic expertise and context that enables us to now really build the kind of AI products that really solve the important jobs that our customers kind of have in front of them.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. Like, had AI just showed up overnight in like 2017 before you had a decade of lessons, you wouldn't know all of the domain expertise that you have now that you can bring. So it's like, while it would have been amazing to get it then as you were so ready for it, it's like I think that the patience is going to pay off because you had this ability to build up institutional knowledge. So you alluded to it earlier, but it sounds like you feel like the way you guys approach AI is something that the market's not, it's ahead of the market or something that isn't seen elsewhere. Like, why is that the case? What are you guys doing that's different?
Yeah, and I would say it's we again like our strength comes on the talent side, but what we have always been strong at was also like building workflows, so helping customers to truly automate processes, kind of like end to end, and being able to connect that all the way to the talent suite, and also having a strong analytics layer. So I think that is important because now it's an interesting question. What ultimately is going to be certain we think a lot these days in jobs to be done, like not in kind of like boxes of functionalities, but more like you're HR leader. What do you want to do? Like you want to build a high performing team. What are sort of the jobs to be done there? You want to set up a really good review cycle. How can we support you to have the right best practices at hand? How do we help the manager while filling in or while preparing their review assessment for someone that we give you through a review assistant that's an AI, historical context from meetings, from previous ad hoc feedback, from the peer feedback. We give you a starting point to actually write your feedback 10 times faster and significantly more accurate because you actually have more of that sort of reminder of what actually happened, right? So you set up a better process, you enable the manager, the employee to actually prepare through that process better. We have an AI functionality that prepares the manager with the conversation guide, right? I have a hard conversation. Now I'm actually being better prepared to have this hard conversation more effectively. Next step, you actually want to have probably well-calibrated results, right? Calibrations are so hard and painful. So we help you to actually make that calibration process easier, more objective and faster. Like these are all the little like jobs to be done that ultimately really help you to get this full sort of job to be done to build that high-performing organization and do that more effectively, more impactful. And again, like the AI is not the end goal in itself, but it's like a means to make the process faster and more effective and honestly like easier for those kind of involved in the different points along the way. So that's like a really concrete example. And if we take that a step further, you have well-calibrated results because you've basically, that process has just become easier. You run engagement surveys. Those engagement surveys are immediately analyzed, not just the quantitative, but also the qualitative data with the help of AI. You can now actually understand that data, generate next lessons, but you can also use your review data of who are your highest performers and what ultimately actually keeps them engaged and retained, right? So you can now mix the or like combine the data to get to again better strategic decisions, better outcomes. And you can use our AI co-pilot to even like ask questions, like interact with the data, with the results in a very conversational way that we used from LLMs, from like ChatGPT or Claude directly, but it was all the contextual data and all the roles and permissions like directly within Leapsome. So that's like a way. There's like different others I could go into how it's like very much built in to make your job as an HR leader or an HR manager much easier.
Yeah, no, I think that shift jobs to be done, it's so obvious, I think, and like it will be obvious in hindsight, but it's not where we've been as as an industry, right? It's been about modules and features, and so it's going to be a shift, but I think it feels inevitable. And I know you do a lot with like chief people officer communities, and you engage with a lot of your customers. So what are you hearing from them when it comes to AI? Like, is the tone excited? Is it scared? What are you seeing are like bottlenecks to adoption? Like, what's the story on the front lines?
Yeah, and maybe a side note on that, just because you brought it up, we have an amazing community, People Over Perks, that actually brings a lot of operators together for exactly these conversations. There's a Slack community, but more importantly, there's also like webinars and community meetups. And we have Jessica Zwan, who's an amazing thought leader. She recently joined as our internal people leader, and she's also like very interactive in that community, interacting with others. So this is something that beyond the product, also as an ongoing discussion with our communities, is very top of mind. And to your questions, I think we hear all of the above. We hear excitement, we hear people being scared, and we just also get a lot of questions that people see all the opportunity or all the talk about kind of like AI, but it's hard for at times to separate maybe the buzz from the reality and like really get from what's possible to truly like impactful applications that are scalable in the everyday sort of like doing. Like, what are the jobs to be done that I actually have on my plate where AI is truly helping me to be faster, more effective right now? And I think this is where I think it's important to use LLMs, for example, to play around, to like figure out how do you build a custom GPT or how do you build something in Claude just to get a sentiment for it. But I think it's also then at the same time, if you think about more like the production scale, so what you actually use on a day-to-day basis in your organization, I think working with trusted vendors like Leapsome actually speeds up a lot of things, right? Because we have a whole team thinking about it. We speak to like customers and community members at a very different scale to understand what works, what doesn't work. We make sure it's compliant. We make sure it has the right data models behind it. So I think this is kind of where I think it's very important to understand the basics, to do your own experimentation just to get a feel for what's possible and what's effective, but then to also like have a good strategy of which vendors actually really kind of support you quickly and at scale. And again, like I think it's something where I think it's also important to acknowledge that whatever vendor you choose has certain design principles maybe baked in under the hood. And I think this is where it's even more important. Like our core differentiation at business is like really building a very effective strategic layer for the people leaders. We're not just a transactional HR platform, right? Compliance is obviously the table stakes, right? Also for us. But we are the tool that helps leaders to be those strategic partners. And that's also very deeply baked into how we think about AI functionalities and how we challenge ourselves of which jobs to be done. We want to make faster and more effective for all parts right now. And we're always open for ideas and feedback. and we listen to our customers. And so again, I mean, I think it also feels like I think we're quite far. And I think the market is giving us that validation, like some of the leading AI brands also like working with us. And at the same time, it feels like we're like this far from where we could be going.
Yeah. So let me end with this. So one thing that I'm thinking about, and you describe jobs to be done by AI, right? It can kind of help me with my talent strategy, and then it can execute on building the performance review and doing the calibration work after the fact. So if that's all being taken off my plate, an idea that we talk about in our newsletter and others is that shouldn't be scary. Like the role for us as, practitioners or people, anyone in the white collar workforce is we need to figure out what are better jobs, right? If these are the jobs that AI is going to take on, then what are the jobs that now I'm suited for? So what are the jobs that chief people officers or HR leaders should be really owning in this new era?
Yeah. So I think first of all, it's asking the right questions. So while AI system can understand and analyze a lot of data, they still don't have all the context you have as a leader or an HR business partner, for example, from the organization. So challenging sort of like what's the questions we need to ask, what should be the priorities, looking into the data, taking the data to like also like evolve your view. I think that is where judgment is still a very important human skill. So it's the judgment, what's important, what questions should we be asking, and then using data to refine them and a bit of an iterative approach. I think that's very important. And then um, making sure you stay close to the business. Like, what does the business need? Like, what's the sentiment that you're getting from, I don't know, the room? Like, there's obviously like important things you can measure in a survey, but if nobody is speaking up in your AMA, right, that's also like data, and that's might not be necessarily all the data we can capture in these systems. So I think it's kind of like complementing your like using your human judgment to set the strategy, to ask the right questions, to stay close to the organization, and thereby move the business forward. And I think there's also like a lot of ways how, again, like we're freeing up time for these higher order tasks. And also on a very practical level, like having that kind of agents by your side to do, for example, like a payroll sense check, right? Seeing kind of gaps or patterns in the data. Like it's a good buddy that can make parts of your job less scary where the stakes are high. So I think it's a very symbiotic relationship that we have, where we can use the technology to enable us and make our jobs also more fun at times.
Yeah, I mean, I find it optimistic, and I think having partners in the market like Leapsome that help businesses achieve the results from AI and see it in an optimistic light is so important. But I'm not an HR practitioner, but even in my job, I find I'm having more fun and doing more of the things I like and less of the drudgery because AI can take on some of that. And so again, it's not automatically obvious where this is heading, but I think, like you mentioned earlier, it's playing with it, it's experimenting, it's just kind of sitting on the frontier is really, really critical. So, thank you so much for the time you've shared today. I really enjoyed our conversation. I'm glad that we made it happen, and excited to see more of the Leapsome AI story as it unfolds.
Yes. Thank you so much, Brad. This was very fun, and hopefully we'll do this again.
Yeah, I would love to. Thank you, Jenny.
And thank you so much.